Lu here. For those who are new here or need a reminder, I'm doing a video series over the lore of the Evillious Chronicles by Mothy P. Today, let's cover the most famous story from the Evillious Chronicles, the story of Evil. I should do a bit of a disclaimer that although I didn't read the light novels due to some having no translations that I could find, or I'm extremely pressed for time because of YouTube's algorithm, I did manage to find TLDRs for them via the wiki and Tumblr, so I'll be using that to help fill in the gaps the songs and manga don't cover. Some corrections, by the way, thanks to you guys in the comments. Karches Krim wasn't in love with Melis, he was in love with another girl in Satyrasis' harem named Eufina Marlon. The Mikulia in Duke of Venomania actually died after the Venomania incident, and another woman named Mikulia Caliground impersonated her while also being a reincarnation of Eve, so that's why she was so paranoid about her secret being exposed. Oh, also, not the last time we'll see a reincarnation of Eve in this series. Also, after the Venomania incident, Irina actually tried to hunt down Lucana Octo to steal her body because she apparently had high magical concentration, but Iluka caught wind of this first and switched bodies with Lucana. Feel free, by the way, to correct me in the comments when I get something wrong, since there is a lot to cover here, and honestly, Mothy did a lot of retcon of content before, especially for Story of Evil, and I'll be sure to include it in my next video as a correction. Where we last left off, Bonica Conchita had become the new Demon of Gluttony, but the old Demon of Gluttony is still around, I think, and works for Prim Marlon, who also hired Irina Clockworker under her belt too. Irina had buried a set of mirrors on the beach containing Bonica for funsies, so we're gonna see who's gonna find those evil mirrors. Now, let's start the story. Okay, so Arth Lucifin de Altriche, I think I'm saying that right? French is not my strong suit, I apologize for the cringe. Is the king of the kingdom of Lucifin and married to Anne, who is best friends with Prim Marlon, who is an absolute bitch in this story. He and Anne had twin children named Riliane Lucifin de Altriche and Alexiel Lucifin de Altriche. Now, in the story for Story of Evil, it states that Alexiel was foretold that he would destroy the kingdom, and that's why he and Riliane were separated, but that has since been retconned due to another manga made and light novels telling the story in a better way, I guess? Like I said, Mothy retcons a lot of things. Now, some say Riliane and Alexiel are reincarnations of Hansel and Gretel. I don't personally think so, but to many it's up in the air. What we do know is that Riliane and Alexiel are a pair of twins that are really special called Irregulars, who basically know a song called the Rebirthday Song that can reset the whole world or enact world-changing spells or whatever. Anyway, back to Arth de Autriche. As we recounted earlier, Bonica Conchita, as a demon, had assassinated Arth, but what we don't know earlier is that Arth wasn't human? To make a long story short, Arth and his family died, and he asked the Millennium Tree, which is a magical tree I like to think is similar to that one tree in that Courage the Cowardly Dog episode, to let him live a little longer, so he was a mud golem in human form until his body gave out, so Bonica Conchita never actually killed him. Apparently, Arth and Prim also had an affair, and she had a daughter named Nay Marlon that she hid in secret that Irina experimented on to make an irregular too. Yeah, this story is really fucking weird, I know. Cut to the twins. They sneak out for funsies like all royal children in literally any media do, and one day they find a set of mirrors inside a box on the beach while playing around. They open the box, and inside the mirrors was Bonica, who became the new Demon of Gluttony, but like I said, the old Demon of Gluttony is still around somewhere. Alexiel tried to befriend her, but Bonica then possessed Riliane and basically grew into a glutton. After that, the twins tried to repel Bonica by reburying the mirrors on the beach, but it only made Bonica weaker instead of leaving completely, showing up to Riliane to steal her food while Riliane's natural pride refused to let her share with the demon Bonica. She also acted coldly to Alexiel later on because she was being manipulated by the court into being the heir despite it being implied that she's actually the younger twin. One important thing to note though is that after Riliane injured her knee at some point while playing on that damn beach, because these kids never learn, I guess, Alexiel taught her a legend about writing a wish on a piece of paper, putting it in a bottle, and setting it out to sea to come true. This will be important later because that is when we all cry like a bitch later. Sometime shortly after this, an assassination attempt was made on Alexiel as the heir, where he proposed he be adopted by his bodyguard to avoid any more messy political shit and let Riliane live a better life. His mother agreed, so Alexiel was presumed dead after this assassination attempt, and he was then adopted by Leonhart of Vondonia and given the name Alan. I'll be calling him Alan for the remainder of this series because literally every single media after Alan is adopted calls him Alan and never his birth name. Okay, so Leonhart also has a adopted daughter named Germaine. Now, Germaine was adopted too and was actually from the Bielzenian Empire, but her family was killed by Leonhart in war, and not wanting to hurt a baby, he adopted her and raised her as his own. Alan and Germaine originally didn't get along, but after some bonding through fighting some bandits together, they became pretty close as foster siblings and even trained together under Leonhart. Alan wasn't completely abandoned by his mother, by the way. She would visit him often, and during a particular visit, she was very sickly and asked Alan to protect his sister. She died after that, and so Leonhart suggested that Alan work in the palace as a servant as a way of reuniting with his sister, but not as the heir to the kingdom. Unbeknownst to Alan when he returned, Nay Marlon had infiltrated the palace and gifted Riliane a hand mirror that contained the demon of pride known as Marie Annette. Basically, Mothy really wanted you to know that Riliane was inspired from Marie Antoinette, okay? I almost forgot to mention this, or I think it got deleted in my script somehow, but if you're wondering what happened to Bonica, Iluka actually came into Riliane's court and completely exorcised Bonica out of her, so she was actually normal for 0.2 seconds before the demon of pride went in her. Riliane just can't catch a break. The demon of pride possessing Riliane made her even more selfish and prideful than she already was, turning her into a bratty and selfish queen at 13 years old already, which for some reason, even though the exorcism of Bonica Conchita out of her caused severe memory issues, so she doesn't remember having a brother, she doesn't put two and two together that Alan might be related to her because they have the same damn face? I guess no one said Riliane was the smartest queen. She was also engaged to Prince Kyle Marlon, Prim's son and Nay's half-brother. Now this makes me super uncomfortable because Riliane is 13 and Kyle is about 20, but you know, unfortunately this is historically accurate if Mothy is trying to copy late 18th century France. However, luckily, Kyle only viewed this betrothal as merely a political alliance, while Riliane had a big crush on him because this is supposed to be a Kaito lookalike, so I can't really blame her. Anyway, over the next few months, Riliane would become extremely ruthless. Despite Iluka's warnings not to be selfish and cruel, Riliane would raise taxes to the damn skies just to buy expensive things for herself, and the only person she ever showed any affection to was Alan. When a famine hit the country and the people were starving, Riliane copied the infamous, but not actually true line of Marie Antoinette by saying let them eat cake. Basically, let them starve, which Leonhart was furious she'd make a horrible suggestion like that. Because he wouldn't let her have her way, and because he was mad at her, Riliane attempted to execute Leonhart by pretending to be injured or captured so she could have him killed for failing his duties as bodyguard and knight, but Alan thankfully stepped in to bring her to her senses. Basically, Alan was the only one holding her back so she wasn't completely wild, probably to Marie Annette's rage that Riliane had someone to hold her back a lot of the time. Except he couldn't hold her back for long. Riliane was almost assassinated by someone at her birthday party, and it left her extremely paranoid, so she only allowed Alan, Nay, and a few other servants to stay by her side out of fear that someone would try to kill her again. This was when she wanted to kill Leonhart again, because I think she found out he was stealing food from the palace to give to the starving citizens, as well as just bruising her pride. After getting Leonhart pretty drunk, it was unfortunately Alan who was forced to kill his own adopted father in a sword fight. Alan killed Leonhart, and his final words were warning him about serving Riliane. Just so people know, by the way, Riliane didn't know Leonhart was Alan's adopted father because they had both agreed earlier it was best kept a secret. Germaine discovered Leonhart's body the next morning on the riverbank and completely broke down after that, knowing full well it was Riliane who had ordered that Leonhart be killed, and began to call her the daughter of evil. After meeting with one of Riliane's maids and Iluka, she vowed that she would overthrow the Lucifenia monarchy for justice and for the people. It's Germaine who acts as the spark needed to begin the roaring flames that would be the revolution, echoing in a pretty smart way to the French Revolution and the need for justice. Back to Riliane. The Green Kingdom of Elfagorn and the Kingdom of Marlon would be the only relief for the people of Lucifin by giving them food. It was during this trip, at some point, Kyle met Michella. Michella is a really fucking complicated character, but to him, she was just a peasant maid from the Green Kingdom and had a best friend named Clareth. Which I forgot to mention in my previous video in full, but Clareth is also a descendant of Satyrace's Phenomania. I don't know if that's since been retconned, but the last time I looked at this continuity, Clareth was a descendant. What I mean by Michella being complicated is that she's actually a super fucking old tree girl. Basically, like, she was a human who actually worked under Levia Barisol and later was reincarnated into a forest spirit who liked to particularly hang around the Millennium Tree, which was Clareth's favorite place to try and get away from the bullying and ridicule she faced being the only person with white hair in a kingdom where everyone has green hair. Michella ended up really liking Clareth, especially when she would wish and pray for a single friend, always trying to cheer her up, despite Clareth never knowing she was a forest spirit, because she often disguised herself as like a little bird. Iluka, though, would take Michella as her apprentice and began to try and reincarnate her into a human form, particularly choosing the physical appearance of Eve Moonlit for her beauty as Michella's human form, with Michella using a song called the Clockwork Lullaby to help Iluka find vessels of sin before Irina could. Though at some point Michella decided to part from Iluka and her other apprentice, where she would be found by Clareth, and the two became best friends. Actually, it's heavily implied Michella and Clareth were in love with each other, but neither knew what love actually was to know that they felt love for each other. Clareth was abused her whole life for her hair color and lineage as a descendant of Satyrace's Phenomania, so she never knew what love felt like before, and simply treasured Michella more than anything, while Michella never actually had the chance in hundreds of years to know what love was. However, after meeting Kyle Marlon, he was absolutely head over heels for her, despite her not really being that interested in him in that way. To her, Kyle was just a really good friend who taught her a lot about the world. Another instance was she met Alan at some point while grocery shopping, and Alan also fell in love with her. You know, something tells me Iluka kind of fucked up by making Michella one of the most canonically beautiful women in the world. Anyway, Kyle fell so damn hard for Michella that he broke off his engagement to Riliane. Riliane was fucking pissed that he loved somebody else, despite Kyle thankfully insisting that he only saw her as a sister and political ally. She became so furious that she ordered her court to slaughter literally every woman with green hair in the entirety of the Elfagorn kingdom. Her court tried to reason with her, but she literally burned down an entire forest in retaliation that destroyed the Millennium Tree, which caused Iluka to leave enraged at Riliane. During this incident known as the Green Hunting, Alan actually tried to hide Michella from Riliane's army, but Nay eventually gave it away to Riliane, and so she had Nay disguise herself as Alan and kill Michella, which haunted Alan to find Michella dead, and later Kyle fucking snapped that he found her dead. Also, although Michella's body died, she was reincarnated again into the Millennium Tree seed, where Iluka gifted the seed to Clareth to plant the new Millennium Tree. This was where Michella's spirit came to Clareth to confess who she really was, her love for Clareth, and a final goodbye to Clareth to make her feel more at peace. Kyle was so grief-stricken that he joined Germain's rebellion against Riliane's rule, and thus began the Lucifenian Revolution. Kyle and Germain wore masks while your typical rebellion stuff happened with protests, pitchforks, and eventually people stormed the palace. With little time to spare, Alan finally revealed to Riliane that he is her twin brother, and to switch clothing. He'll pretend to be her while she flees into the woods as a servant. She tries to refuse with her sobs, but he eventually gets her to agree, and so Riliane was able to flee while Alan was captured pretending to be Riliane. What I can't seem to know if it's confirmed is if Riliane actually saw Alan's execution or not. This is because the official music video Mothy released shows artwork of Riliane seeing Alan's execution, and subsequently every other music video did the same thing. I mean, even the musical did it too. But the novel and later songs imply she never actually saw him die because she was running for her life. What we do know is that possibly Iluka or her apprentice used the clockwork lullaby on Alan to calm him down in front of the guillotine and the chimes of 3 p.m., which to him always meant spending time with Riliane at tea time. His last words aloud were something like, "Oh, it's tea time," before being killed, although his final thoughts was that he wished they could be reborn as twins again. He was then sent to the Heavenly Yard, which we'll get to that whole mess of the afterlife way later. After Alan's death, if Riliane witnessed it or not, she shows up on the coast where Clareth, of all people, actually found her and took her into a monastery to become a nun. She didn't tell anyone she was Riliane and instead called herself Rin. Not doing so hot after her losing her only family and kingdom. She was incredibly spoiled and difficult to work with at the monastery, but eventually began to befriend Clareth, where she talked with her about a sapling she was raising and hoped to plant it sometime. Clareth was saying she believed everyone should be equal and basically talked mad shit about Riliane, not knowing she was Riliane right in front of her, which Riliane got mad at her for believing she'd never be friends with her if she knew who she really was. The next few years, Riliane would work towards redemption and I guess worked that demon out of her. Yeah, I can't seem to find any information on how Marie Annette was exorcised out of Riliane. I guess working in the monastery just made it work itself out. At some point, she was praying in a confessional area where Clareth heard her confess alone that she was Riliane Lucifine d'Autriche and wished to be forgiven for her sins as the daughter of evil. Clareth had a full-on breakdown, hearing her only new friend was the girl who caused the murder of her best friend and almost girlfriend, so she plotted to kill Riliane while she was on the beach. Riliane remembered the ritual with Alan when they were both kids, how you put a wish in a bottle and send it to the sea to come true, and so she was watching her bottle get sent off and prayed that her wish would come true. It was then that Clareth was going to kill Riliane for everything she did when she heard Alan's voice talk to Riliane, wishing they could be reborn as twins again, where Clareth understood that Riliane was atoning and suffering just as much as she was. Instead of killing her, she cut her hair instead, and the two later planted the Millennium Tree together. They made up and became really good friends. Although Irina Clockworker had taken over a woman named Mikina Freezes' body and was attacking an important girl named Yukina Freezes, where Riliane tried to stop her and was nearly possessed by the original demon of gluttony if it wasn't for Nay and Bonika's protection. Irina's cat form was finally killed by Germain in this attack, thus ending Irina's shenanigans for now. To end Riliane's story, she became a nun, and although Clareth left to her own convent, the two were still super close friends while Riliane looked after orphans in the church. The children all loved and adored her, even until she was an old lady dying in bed. She confessed her message in the bottle to the children, which was that she wanted to be forgiven for her sins, where one of the orphan boys in particular made up a fake response to her message in the bottle saying she was forgiven of all her sins, which let her pass away peacefully. Except, who is Yukina, and what happened to Kyle? Unfortunately, because the story of Evil is so long, I'll have to stop it here because, I have to edit all these videos, and I don't want to make this video too long for the sake of both engagement and because I have to edit all of this myself. That'll be it for this video, guys. Next time, we'll be tackling the aftermath of Daughter of Evil, the story of Sloth, and maybe the Tailor of Nbizaka, if there's enough time left in that video. For this video, we tackled about 13 songs, an unfortunately unfinished manga, a musical, and 4 light novels. Can you believe the story of Evil was this detailed? You'd never know if you just heard the original Servant of Evil and Daughter of Evil, would you? For those wondering about the song Rebirthday, because it is connected to the story of Evil actually, and recently Mothy confirmed that the mysterious boy was Alan in the song, that will be covered in the afterlife section, because that entire afterlife section of the Evillious Chronicles is a mess, and I'd rather cross that bridge when I get to it. Can you believe the story of Evil was this detailed? You'd never know if you just heard the original Servant of Evil and Daughter of Evil, would you? As always, be sure to let me know down below if I got anything wrong, because let's be real, this shit is messy, and obviously what you think. Daughter of Evil and Servant of Evil are some of my favorite Vocaloid songs, so let me know down below what you think. Hey guys, thanks for watching! If you liked the video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing if you're new. If any of you would like to help support my channel in any possible way, my Ko-fi page is down below in the description, along with all of my social media. For any subscribers, new or old, who'd like to help with video ideas, or maybe just want to talk about anime or something, I have a fan server linked down below. See you next time!